I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Abstract Essay, where ideas take shape, thoughts find depth, and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. He's the author of the book Moonshine Path of the Raven, no other than Mr. Max Shippee.
How you doing? Hello. Thanks for having me on, Daniel. I really appreciate it.
Welcome to Abstract Essay, Mr. Max. And can you please introduce me more about yourself that I missed?
Sure. I'm Max Shippee. I'm the author of Moonshine Path of the Raven, Moonshine, a new novel. I've also been an actor. I've owned a gym. I've done lots of things, but lately writing is taking on a new passion, and I'm hoping to break into the writing and publishing world.
Yes, indeed. And thank you so much for sharing moonshine to the world. Hoping for more and more moonshine to come. What sparked the initial idea for Moonshine, Path of the Raven, and what is a character, setting, or theme that came first?
Sure. I would say that the setting came first. I had this idea for a place in the North Woods that was somewhat magical, took place in the past. I like the idea of having something happen in the past because we get to take all the technology today that sort of distracts us from greater stories that we could be living and takes that out. So placing it back in the time when you had to do more things by hand. There wasn't as much machinery. You had to be clever with how you survived in the northern woods, a place where it was cold, where you had to snuggle up and be warm in the winter. And when the sun finally came out for the summer, you couldn't wait to get outside. But it also meant that you had to prepare for the winter that was coming. One of all of our favorite books, of course, is Game of Thrones. And the big line for that is winter is coming, and that's never more true than when you live up north. So that
Yes.
was a big inspiration for the book, is to have it happen in a place where those seasons are very prevalent, and the metaphor of the seasons follow in the book as well. What happens in the winter is a time for hibernating, if you will, or for little mini discoveries, and then those sprout in the spring, come to fruition, and then we have a time of rest again in the fall.
How did the title evolve, and what does the Path of Raven signify in the context of your story?
Sure. Moonshine is, for this book, it's not so much a play on words, but for the next book in the series, book two, it will be a little more evident that it's a little bit of a play on words. Moonshine refers to some magic that happens in the book. There are werewolves and witches in my book, and the moonshine, of course, references the power of the werewolves. It also references some activities that they'll be doing in book two, not to give anything away too soon. But I love to play with titles and have kind of double meanings to things. And part of that meaning will be literally like moonshine. The alcohol will have a meaning in the second book a little bit more. But to call the whole series moonshine seemed appropriate. Path of the Raven is a raven is sent to help one of the characters find their path, literally through the book, from going to from the north to the south, so literally in the geography, and moving through space, through the country. And so Path of the Raven refers to that, a magical raven that is the guide for one of the main characters as he finds our hero and brings him to his new home. So the Path of the Raven is both the path of the actual raven and, of course, a path of the hero, and also moving from a place of dark, often, which the raven represents, to a place more magical and moving north, which is why also on the cover we have this guiding light of the moon, which is pulling us to the north as well.
Mr. Max, were there any real life historical events, myth, or personal experiences that influenced this book?
Yeah, if you read between the lines a little bit, you'll notice that there's a one of the main characters' names is Arthur, and that's a reference to a very subtle reference to the King Arthur legends. The shortest way to describe the book is a young boy in the early 1900s discovers that he's the reincarnation of King Arthur. We don't lean very hard into that King Arthur story. We don't have a round table and things like that. But if you're reading between the lines, you might find that there's a parallel to some of the legends that we know. There's another character named John who actually is on the path of the Raven for the first part of the book, and his character is a real life character named John Henry, which has historical context in the south of the United States. I also have personal connections to some of the names in the book. I took some liberties, and even though the town is a different town that I grew up in, I used some of my own familiar names and things so I could embody that more and understand it a little better. So I borrowed some stuff from my own personal life. I also borrowed some things from larger legends, which I think is a great way to retell a story, is to take an idea of a local or a larger legend and say, how can I apply it to this story and retell it in a compelling way?
Mr. Max, what research did you do to create the book setting, folklore, distilling practices, as well as the culture itself?
Sure. I did actually a lot of research. I'm sure that the people who listen to this podcast and writers in general, a lot of us are research junkies. We love to do our research and can very easily get down a research rabbit hole where I should be writing, but no, I'm learning and I'm learning. So I did a lot of research on different types of witchcraft, on different types of magic, on werewolf legends, because some of the stuff I wanted to make up on my own, but then other stuff, other pieces of the story or pieces of the legend, I really wanted to have it grounded in things that people already had in different cultures as far as werewolves go, whether that's European culture or Indian culture or South American culture. I found that if I could pull little pieces of those and witches as well from all those different cultures, it would ring a little bit more true. So I did a lot of research on the magic, in addition to just having my own creativity. I also actually went to the town that the book is based in, which is Forge, New York. It's actually called Old Forge, New York, but I actually traveled there when I did my final pass of the book, my final rewrite of the book, and did some edits and things. I actually went there for 3 or 4 days and sat in that town, did a couple hikes, and made sure I knew how the town was laid out. And that really affected how I introduced certain parts of the town. It actually affected how uh, the actual places in town. There's a hardware store in the town of Old Forge. It's very, very, very famous. And I changed the name of it, but I still reference it by the founder's name. It's called Forge Hardware or something like that. But in the book, I call it Cohen's Stock and Staple. And a guy named Cohen was the actual one who founded the store. So there's a fun cultural reference there from the actual town that the story is based in. Even though it's a different name, it still carries some of that history. And that I feel like really grounds the story and really makes it very, very real. Funny enough, I we made our my kid through a summer camp made a friend, and we had dinner with their parents, and I brought them a book to give to them. And I was telling the mom, oh, it happens in upstate New York, north of Utica. She's like, oh, I'm from that area. And I said, well, it happens in this town called Forge. And she couldn't believe it. She was like, what? You're kidding me. And I'm like, do you know where that is? Because it's really the middle of nowhere. Like north of Forge, there's nothing but woods. And she said she used to be like play the part of the town mascot, which is really funny. And so we made this really, really interesting connection about this middle of nowhere place in upper New York State. Yeah. So there's been a lot of research as far as that goes, as well as just general research about, since it's my first book, general research about how long a book should be, how fast it should move, what the grade levels are, what the reading levels should be for a book if I want it to be young adult and more accessible. So some of the things that we think of as research have to do with story. And other things that we have to think of as research are how the book is actually going to go to an audience. And of course, I'm still learning about marketing and about how to be good on podcasts and how to make sure that I'm publicizing the book as much as possible.
Did you encounter any surprising challenges in blending historical or mythical elements with your narrative?
Sure. Uh, a lot of those challenges for sure, because On the one hand, you want to keep it grounded in something that's real and legends that everyone knows. On the other hand, you want to make it different enough that it truly engages people and that it feels new as opposed to the same old thing. So, a lot of the spells that we cast in the book, literally the second chapter has the very first spells. Those were wonderfully challenging for us to make sure that the verbiage and how the spell was spoken made sense from a historical standpoint and also made sense from a magical standpoint. It's one of my favorite parts of the book actually is the very first spell that's said, which is since Gilgamesh your song was sung from silver moon to silver tongue, here a blade to cut the skin, from these words spell begins. So we know that Gilgamesh, even if you don't know the story specifically, we know that it is indeed a very, very old story. Then the second line, Silver Moon and Silver Tongue. Well, the title is Moonshine, and we have a silver moon. Like, what does that say? We know that silver is bad for a werewolf legend, and silver tongue, wow, that refers to words that can slice through, So as the spell moves forward, there's little clues about how old these stories are, how old this magic is, and how deep it goes into this world. So some of that research that you speak about isn't just for places or for old legends, but it's also research with a thesaurus to make sure that these words have the deepest possible meaning that we want them to have. So a lot of research went into this book for sure, but I'm sure I'm not unique that way either.
Let's talk about the character development, Mr.
Sure.
Max. How did your protagonists take shape? Did they change significantly during the writing process?
I would say that I think that is the case. There were certain times when I felt like Sam is the main character of the book. He's the main character. And I did want him to go through a journey. And I wasn't actually sure at the beginning what that journey was going to look like at the very end. I know I wanted him to transform. I know I wanted him to experience something new. I knew that there would probably be loss in his life and he would have to rise above that. But it wasn't until probably a year into writing that I actually discovered or downloaded, if you will, the final scene, which I think really guided how the rest of the book played out. Because for me, once I have that final scene, I can write to that. And in a way, I know that, excuse me, I know that I have to earn that final scene. So he changed for sure. He started out almost too innocent. Uh, as I was doing the rewrites, I found that having someone who's too innocent, we actually don't buy it in that day and age. Like kids or society was a different place, but at the same time, they knew a lot more. That things were tragedy was much more present in their life. Just not having a meal in front of them, nobody had running water, like things like these, where the hardship was just a daily thing. So realizing that that was the case, I had to make sure that he didn't seem weak from the start, that he had a certain kind of strength that could translate and bring us through the whole book. So that was something I had to adjust very early in my writing, is adjust how I saw the main character and then how that affected his journey throughout the whole book.
The raven is often symbolic. How does its role in the story reflect deeper themes?
Sure. The raven is both this magical bird that literally guides our hero and John, the helper, on the path that happens in the book. But it's also a little bit mischievous as well. Our main witch, her name is Letha. She's the one who conjures the raven originally. And even in the first conjuring, when she conjures the raven, she's trying to get it to go do something for her, and the raven's kind of giving her a hard time, where it's kind of squawking at her, and she's like, just go do the thing I'm asking you. And the raven's like, okay, fine, since you asked me so nicely, I will. It doesn't say anything, but cocks its head and does certain things like that. So I thought it was important that often a raven is seen as something maybe not so positive. It can be seen as black magic, but I thought that it was important in this book that it was seen as part of a larger magic, because it's not unique to have a raven be a messenger or to be involved with a witch as far as being a familiar. But the way that she forms the raven is unique. And the fact that she sends it on a journey, I think, is unique. And the fact that it provides a little bit of comic relief as it goes along is unique. and it is there right through the entire book. It plays a very large part in the first 2/3 of the book, and then we don't see it so much, and then it comes in again at the end. But the Path of the Raven for sure is appropriate for the book and for the journey that our hero goes on.
Were there any side characters who unexpectedly stole the spotlight while writing?
Oh yes, of course. I have two that just were amazing. The first one's name is Vedoma. She's another, I would say she's a witch so much as a magical gal, if you will. They meet her in New York City. And you can imagine New York City in the 1920s was a very different place than it is 100 years later. Um, so she has a certain type of magic and mischief that is almost begging for her own story. It really is. Like when she shows up, within a few pages, you're like, I like this gal. I want to know more about her. My wife said she needs her own story, and I agree that she needs her own story for sure. There's another character which is actually one of my very very favorite characters. His name is Stu, and he shows up as our hero Sam arrives in this new place. And Stu is a boy his own age, 10 or 11, and he is a wonderfully mischievous and wonderful kid. Like a lot of us remember as kids, there's always one kid who's just the right kind of trouble. Not trying to hurt anybody, not trying to be bad necessarily, but always has a great idea. Let's go do this thing. Let's build a contraption, and turns out that it, breaks a window, and that's just the way that it is. He's not trying to do anything bad, but things are always kind of going sideways. But he's got a great little attitude and is mischievous. And Stu is another character that for sure wants his own book. And funny enough, he has a great little connection with Vadoma that I think is very, very cute. And I'm actually anxious to see how that little connection plays out, because he's quite taken with her in the book, which I think is cute as well. Most of us as young boys can remember first that first person that kind of made us blink our eyes and look twice and be like, "Oh, she's really pretty." And he has that. Fedoma has that effect on him, so we have a little fun with that in the book as well.
Let's talk about the writing process and
Sure.
challenges, Mr. Max. What did your daily writing routine look like for this book?
That's a great question. The I started this book out with NaNoWriMo, which I think has kind of fallen apart at this point. But at the time, it was National November Writing Month, I think is what it stood for. And in November, you're challenged to write 50,000 words. So it was a gamification of that we used. Um, it was a gamification of that. So as as you write, you earn these little badges and things like that. So it challenges you to write those 50,000 words, which is essentially about 1,600 words every day. So for the first draft of my book, I upped that ante a little bit and made it to 2,000 words. So I literally was just trying to get 2,000 words every day. And by the time I finished, I ended up with, I don't know, 120,000 words or something like that. And a lot of it I knew that I couldn't use, but at some point you just have to get the words out and get that ball rolling. So once I had all that material, and it was all in the same world, but it wasn't all the same story. I realized that Sam took up most of that story. So then I shifted what I thought was going to be my first book, into this book, which is a story about Sam. And then from there, I some of it was already kind of plotted out. Like I knew that I wanted a climax. I knew where I wanted kind of the final scene to be. So at first, it was mostly pantsing, just writing and writing and writing. And a lot of that was just history of the town, of the world. And then once I got through that initial 100, words, that's when I started to actually, I wouldn't say quite outline as much as take some notes for myself to decide, like, wait, is it a little slow here? Is it a little too fast here? Do I need more description? Do I need to have more characters? Do I need to have less characters? Is there too much action? Is it slowing down too much? So yeah, so that's the writing process of this. I would say was at first a very very big brainstorm, and then after that, moving on to something that I tried to organize it with, and then fill in the gaps very much on purpose.
Which chapter or scene was the hardest write? to write and why?
Uh, what's interesting is that the chapter 13 stands out as being very hard to write. And the reason for that is that's when the tragedy falls upon our hero. And it's it when I wrote it, I was a little like, ew, like wow. I don't believe that came out of me. It gets very dark because tragedy happens to Sam, but it happens in a very sort of casual way. And that can be very unsettling sometimes when something like that happens and it's very nonchalant, if you will. So that's the chapter that even though it's very short, was very challenging, and it actually didn't take a lot of writing. And the most challenging part of that chapter was actually deciding whether or not to include it as we decided on publishing the book. Because on the one hand, tragedy and things like that happen on a regular basis uh, for people at this time. And on the other hand, what is expected from a young adult novel? And is it too heavy for a novel of this kind? But then when you realize what kids are watching these days and the rest of it, it's probably fine. So, yeah.
Did the story ever take an unexpected turn that surprised you as an author?
Uh, yeah, the unexpected turn. I think was uh, there's two actually. One was when Stu, this character that I've already described, when he showed up, I wasn't expecting him at all, and we realized as we were writing it that it needed this certain kind of levity at this point. And when he showed up, that was very surprising. And part of the surprise was that he showed up pretty much fully formed. Like when I started writing him, I knew everything. Like I just got him immediately. It wasn't the kind of thing where I needed to over research his character or decide on a bunch of things. I really got his character right off the bat. And then the other surprising thing was how the final scene of the book and what happens in that final scene of the book, and how there are certain things that, not to lean on the tragedy or give anything away too much, but there are things that
Spoilers.
yeah, exactly, there are things that have to happen that when they do happen you're like, oh, really? And then when you think about it you say, yeah, that is how it has to be. It has to be that way. It can't be a different way. So so yeah, I also was surprised as people read it that there's a early character named Arabella, which is like she's in the first maybe 8 or 9 chapters, and people really love her character. So it also surprised me that way, that after reading it, other people reading it, they were really connecting with this other character, which makes me think that maybe I should be leaning on writing her into her own book as well, or giving her a little bit of a bigger piece of the story. I think that's part of the fun of writing as well, is discovering what people are connecting with, and should you give them a little more of what they want, or should you just write what you want? And I think the best writers can do a little bit of both.
Definitely. So let's talk about the genre and style. How would you describe the genre of moonshine, and did it evolve during the writing?
The genre is young adult. It is a coming of age story, and I would say that was probably true from the very beginning when this story was kind of decided to get written. I didn't think I wanted to make it too advanced. The hero of the book himself is 12 years old, so I felt like writing it to an audience that could relate to him would be important. I know that, to call out big authors, I know that people aren't 12 that enjoy Harry Potter. So I don't feel like that has to be the case necessarily. But for this case, I like the young adult world. It seemed a little bit more simple. And I feel like it settled into that quite well. Um, to be honest, I don't have a huge English degree. Don't have a huge vocabulary, so it probably matches what I'm capable of as well. I don't think I can write War and Peace. I don't think I'm up for that. So
Yes. And how did you balance action, mystery, and deeper thematic layers of moonshine?
yeah, uh, That is one of the challenges that I faced as I went through this is to, the classic English teacher thing where, oh, here's what the author meant in this scene, and did they really mean that? And I really did my best to, if I could introduce or imbue a scene with something that was more meaningful. Like there's a great scene where Stu and Sam are walking into town, and they literally, as their relationship develops and as they become closer to each other, they literally go through a gate. And very on purpose, I had a moment where they went through the gate on purpose because their relationship actually went through a certain kind of door and they opened up to each other more. So that's the scene that comes to mind immediately as far as deeper metaphor and deeper meaning within certain scenes, and what those things mean. Of course, there's happy little accidents as you read through and you discover that, like, oh, that was really smart how I put that together. I didn't even realize I was doing that. But for sure, there's some spots in there too where, the English teacher that I sleep next to every night really tried to lean into, hey, let's make this something fun to teach as well as just fun to read.
Mr. Marks, what authors or works influence your storytelling style in this book?
One of my favorite authors is Mark Twain. I think he's magnificent. I read a lot of him as a kid. I love his sense of humor. I love his forward thinking. I love that he's relatively timeless. So he has influenced me for sure. As far as modern authors, Percival Everett, I think, is amazing. He's he wrote James, which is a bestseller right now, which is the retelling. It's funny because it's the retelling of a Mark Twain story, which is Huckleberry Finn, but it's the retelling through the slave Jim's experience, and it's just magnificent. It's a great, great, great book. So I'm a huge fan of his in the modern day. So those two, as of right now, are big ones. I also used to listen to a lot of Garrison Keeler, who isn't necessarily an author, but he for sure is a storyteller. He had a radio program that I used to listen to growing up with my father, and he would make us sit and listen. But over the years, I learned to really appreciate his eloquent storytelling within his show called The Prairie Home Companion. So the idea to be able to take a second and tell a nice, on purpose, uh, uh, controlled, and conscious story, for sure, from those three people, from Mark Twain to Percival Everett to Garrison Keeler, those have been my huge, larger influences. Uh, yeah, I would say that.
Mr. Marks, if you could write a companion story like prequel, sequel, or spin off, what would it be?
Well, this book, it will be part of a series. So it is the first book in a series. So the next book here will focus. I'm actually still deciding if it's going to focus super on Sam, the main character of this book, which I think is the best way to do this, or if it'll kind of branch out a little bit and we'll add some more and more characters. You know, I've referenced Game of Thrones once already, but there are main characters in that series, but the focus does shift for sure. Where I can see that for sure being a little bit of perhaps how Moonshine is told as well. I don't want it to get too big and too unwieldy where you're trying to track so many different characters. Uh, but this for sure is going to go somewhere next. There's also characters in this book that each could have their own book as far as an origin story goes. It's almost like, you have the Justice League, and then you go and you tell Batman's origin story and you tell Superman's origin story. There are characters in these books that, Rowan, who's as Irish as they come, and the character called Kofi, who's Nigerian and dark, dark, dark African. How they got here is a very interesting story, and I have some notes about how they got here without actually writing out that story. But I hope that a lot of people would love to hear what those stories are.
Definitely, we hope we will support Mr. Max Shippee. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101 in fourth season, as well as my movie 101 review and music 101, and my baby podcast law 101 and mental health 101, love letters in third season, and science 101 and sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Max, what's next for you? Are there more stories in this world?
Yes, there are for sure more stories in this world, and I'm currently working on them. I actually wrote a bunch of words yesterday just to kind of flesh out some history and things like that. I'm giving myself to the end of the year to hopefully have something rough and done. And then it would be great if I could keep myself on some kind of 1 year to 18-month schedule as far as releasing these. I know that oftentimes it's easier to have two books written and sell than it is to have one. So I'm trying to get to that two, that second, that third, and that fourth book as fast as I can while still giving it the attention that it should have.
Looking forward for that, Mr. Max. And please do come over on Abstract Essay on and Book 101 review and let's talk about it. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your moonshine?
Sure. You can find me. My website is readmoonshine.com. I'm on all the socials at the same at Read Moonshine. So www.readmoonshine.com and TikTok and YouTube and all the things that are at Read Moonshine. And thank you, Daniel, so much for having me on today. It was fun to be on here on Abstract Essay. Really appreciate it.
You're most welcome, Mr. Max. And I said, looking forward for those books, and you are most welcome to come back anytime. Yes, people, let's support Mr. Max Shippee because if you support him, for sure, more and more and more empowering novels to come. So, Mr. Max, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
More to come, people. See you soon.